you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick Podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K is the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk facts.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
Play it on the car ride, play it when you lounge. X and O, you know that we can hold it down. Shout out to my man Sammy, got it off the ground. And to all the listeners tuned in right now, got debates, analysis, and speculation. This is sports talk for the new generation. You know where to find us, got a reputation. Sick Podcast, your #1 sports destination.
We're giving all our devotion, riding high on this wave of emotion. Going all out, yeah, cause this is our time. No, ain't no stopping us till we reach the finish line. All in, we came here to win. We're gonna give everything. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick. On fire, we're ready to fight. We'll bring the house down tonight. S-I-C-K on the run. S-I-C-K, sick.
S-I-C-K, it's the sickest podcast. Tune in for the audio, or you can even watch back. Giving players all the props or put them on blast. We don't give no hot takes, only talk back. S-I-C-K, 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 S-I-C-K.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. The Eye Test with Pierre, McGuire, and Jimmy Murphy.
The Stanley Cup winning Colorado Avalanche And after 22 years, Raymond Mark!
The sickest NHL podcast. Brought to you by TCS Customs and Logistics. Moving pieces, delivering peace of mind. It's gonna be sick.
And welcome to another edition of the Eye Test here on the Sick Podcast Network. He is Pierre McGuire. I am Jimmy Murphy. And before we start, Pierre, I just want to recognize what today is, and that is the 80th anniversary of D-Day. So to all that made the ultimate sacrifice and all that fought there 80 years ago that still may be alive or past, we appreciate what you did for our freedom. And I also want to give a special shout out to Randy Workman, our friend here in the comments section. His father was there. Happy Elmore Workman was there on D-Day fighting for our freedom. So thank you to your dad, Randy. All right, we are almost there, Pierre. You can start to feel it now. It's a Stanley Cup Final, and in honor of that, I'm celebrating a certain team you're familiar with. In the background, I'm apparently blocking your mug, but there is the 1992 Stanley Cup champion Pittsburgh Penguins that was coached by one Scotty Bowman and you. And we will be joined by the one and only Scotty Bowman shortly here on the Eye Test to help us preview the 2024 Stanley Cup Final. But Pierre, how are you today, sir?
I'm excellent. I'm really proud of you for bringing up the 80th anniversary of D-Day. About 7 years ago, I took my family there on a trip.
Wow.
And we did it on purpose because my grandchildren never had it, or my children, I should say, never had a chance to meet their great grandmother. And my grandmother's home was overtaken by the Nazis in Playtown, France. And I wanted my children to see that. And I wanted to see everything around there. And, you know, it's a pretty emotional thing. And I remember my daughter being at Juno Beach, which is where the Canadian soldiers came.
Yeah.
And you're in the poppy fields, and then obviously going over to Omaha and Utah, and then Point to Hawk. And, you know, if you haven't heard it, you should listen to Ronald Reagan's speech from Point to Hawk. Okay. It's a timeless endeavor from former President Reagan, obviously passed now, but it's an amazing speech. And if you've been to Point to Hawk and you hear that speech, you're like, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So, Jimmy, what you said was so appropriate to start the show. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, you know, and look, I come from a Vietnam vet. It's not what they did on Normandy, but I appreciate anyone, no matter what battle it's been, what war, that is out there fighting for us right now and has fought for us. So we wouldn't be here without them, Pierre. So
well, I can say that firsthand.
Yeah, you can say that directly.
Yeah. So because it's an interesting story. My grandfather met my grandmother in World War I.
Okay.
So my grandfather's platoon actually went and saved my grandmother's home in the 1917, 18, who knows. Wow. And then, you know, where are we? 1940, when the Nazis invaded France, they took their family's home over again. And so my grandmother wasn't living there then. She was living in Grand Forks, North Dakota with my grandfather, and also in Michigan. They were splitting time between the two. But I want to share this with everybody. I met my uncle Henri, who is my grandmother's brother. And I met him when I was young and then older in my life. And he was part of the French resistance. And I remember one night I was older at the time, him telling me stories about it. It was pretty amazing.
It's amazing. You know, I was thinking about it, Pierre, too. It's just, you know, some of those, I mean, they were kids that went in there. They wouldn't even be old enough to drink. When you
go to Omaha Beach and you see the cemetery,
God,
if you don't cry there, then there's something wrong with
you.
There's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
It's an amazing, emotional, touching place to be.
Yeah. And let it be a lesson too. I mean, you know, I was driving around today, some idiot cut me off, and I'm about to get a little frustrated.
Well, you live in Massachusetts, Jimmy, so you got to understand that's just how they
I'm up in New Hampshire now, remember? So, but I felt it like fresh, and then I said, remember what today is. You know what I mean? Things could be a lot worse, you know? And what those kids, as I said, went through, what they were willing to do and what they did. And some of them didn't even make it to the shore, Pierre. That's...
No, I mean, again, I took my young children, my wife.
Yeah.
You take your young children and your wife, and you go through it, and then you see the historical moments. You go through the cemeteries, and you go to the battlefields, and you go. An interesting part of D-Day, and these troops deserve credit too, because they were young kids too, and some people will agree with me, some won't. But if you go see the German cemetery there, which I did go to, and I've been there twice, once with my father and my mother, and once with my children and my wife. A lot of those kids didn't want to fight there either.
No, no,
they were forced to go there. And when you see their cemetery, and then you see the cemetery of D-Day, it's a stark reminder of evil versus good. It's amazing. It really is.
I'm glad you brought that up too. Not to say we'll get to hockey in a second. But my dad, I remember when he was talking to me about it when I was young, and he taught me that. He said, look, a lot of the Allies fighting, like those Germans did not want to fight for Hitler. I mean, they were just, like you said, they were forced to. I mean, they're just there because they had no choice. And, he told me even when he was in Vietnam, when he was fighting, like some of the people he was opposing in the battlefields would lay down their arms because they didn't want to fight for communism. And it was the same thing there in D-Day. And when they were fighting against the Nazis, I mean, it's just, war is horrible, and that's the bottom line. But I mean, just
thanks to all the families that lost loved ones there.
Yeah, there's a lot still around, and that's I know we're getting to that point where a lot of these guys still aren't walking this earth, but there still are some. And man, I don't know if you've been watching, Pierre, but I've been seeing the video clips on Twitter and of these Americans that flew over there and just going there for the first time. There's one it was just, I lost a little, I'll admit it. It was a twin brother looking at his twin brother's grave. Like, wow. And he hadn't been there since then.
I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine. I think I shared this with you once before. My father's three brothers all fought in the Pacific Theater. One was on the USS New Jersey, and the other were in the Marine Corps. And my Uncle Pat, they're all passed away now, but my Uncle Pat was in the 1st Marine Division, like barbaric stuff.
Yep.
And and just you hear about and you learn about it. You just learn. You learn about it.
Yeah. I've always been interested in history. History is one of my favorite things. So thank you again to anyone out there still.
Well said, Jimmy.
All right. Let's get into this Stanley Cup Final. Look, we're going to have Scotty on in a few minutes. Make sure he's not there. All right. No, he's not there yet, but we will have Scotty Bowman on. Pierre, just, now that we're almost here, we can start to talk about X's and O's and all that and start to analyze. And one of the things I want to bring up to Scotty and to you, and you can attest to it too, because you coached in two Stanley Cup Finals, is just how much the coach plays a role at this point. I was just listening to our good friend Mitch Melnick open up his show before I came on here, and he was playing some clips from Paul Maurice, and Paul's like, look, at this point, I'm not per se coaching as much as I'm guiding. And, the guys know what they have to do. We're that deep. We're so far into this now. They know what they got to go out and do. So it's more about just kind of guiding them through the waters and all the stuff that's going to, in one of it being the media, being us, that's going to come at them in waves for the next 2 weeks. And I just wanted you to kind of, remember that and kind of take us sort of behind the scenes on what that was like for you.
I think once or twice in a playoff series over, let's say, 4 rounds, a coach, especially the head coach, has to make a difference, whether it's with bench management, whether it's a major adjustment. We're about to have the winningest coach in the history of the National Hockey League on.
Here, not to cut you off, but let's bring him in right now. And
but he's going to interrupt me, and then it's going to be a problem. I want to pump his tires.
Well, I can't leave Scotty Bowman hanging, Pierre. I love you, but you can't.
Okay. I was going to just pump his tires pretty significantly.
Well, you continue. We'll bring him in right now, and you can do it right to him. Scotty Bowman joining us here on the eye test on the Sick Podcast Network once again, as he has before every playoff round. Hey, Scotty, how you doing?
Good. Hi. Can you see me okay?
We see you fine. You're looking handsome as ever, my friend.
Okay, so Jimmy, before he gets to talk, I want to finish my story.
Yes.
So in 1992, the Pittsburgh Penguins were down 3-1 and he's the winningest coach of all time, and he's the best coach in all of professional sport. I'm proud to say that in front of him. And he makes a decision to change our neutral zone play against the Washington Capitals. We have to win Game 5, Game 6, and Game 7 to win the series. We got to win 5 and 7 on the road. Scotty takes over, changes something, brings Mario Lemieux up to his suite. Rick Kehoe, Barry Smith, and I were with Scotty. And Mario and Scotty talk, and Mario buys into the plan. That's when a coach has to make a difference. And Scotty's done that more than once over the course of his career. So now you can talk, Scotty.
Well, Scotty, what I was just saying, I don't know if you go ahead, Scotty, you talk, and I'll tell you in a second.
No, Mario was very receptive. Like Pierre mentioned, we were a team that could really play offense. It proved it during the season, and they won the year before on the same platform. Nobody could outscore us, but then we got behind in this series, and looking back, Washington had a really solid defense core. They had fellas like Iafrate and Hatcher. They had a good big defense. And anyways, we weren't going to be able to do it. We were down in the series, and I grabbed Mario and I said, Mario, we're not going to be able to score this team. They look at their defense. I think there was somebody else that they had on the defense. I'm not
Callie Johansson, Sylvain Cote. Those four.
So they had 3 20-goal scorers on the defense core, and that was unusual in those days. But so I said, he said, well, I know what you mean. I said, well, Mario, you're going to have to make sure, because the team looks up to you, you're going to have to make sure that the players know that we're not going to be able to win trying to outscore the opposition. We're going to have to really tighten up and play a tight game. And he said, well, what can we do? So we went into the platform of how we're going to not do a lot of forechecking. We're going to really, bottle up the neutral zone and try to win 1-0. I think the game that we played, Game 7, was it Game 7 we played in Washington?
In Washington, yeah.
It was a one goal game.
Okay.
We got an empty net goal, but it was a 2-1 hockey game. And that was unusual for that team to play that way, because we had offensive players. But Mario was very helpful. He talked to the players, and then in fact he even addressed them before going on the ice in the first period. After the warm up, he said, "Now look, this is the way we're going to play." Wow. And he was a knock. Yeah. So that's true. But I think I was listening to you before, and I know what you were saying about Paul Maurice, and I really think the core players on a team, and Pierre and Paul is right. The farther you go, you can't be changing an awful lot, and I think the players themselves, the core, have to really have an input, because they want to win as much as you do, probably even more, some of them, because they never won a cup and stuff like that. And so I think that's the most important thing, is the core of the team have to feel that the head coach and the other coaches are comfortable that they have a say in how they're going to play. Okay. And I was always lucky that when I got to different teams, I would try to take the top players and say to them, look, we can win this way, or we can't win this way. And you're going to get incidents during the year. I know a time, and I could tell, I don't know if I've ever told Pierre this one, but I maybe I did tell it on your podcast, but we had a nice core in Montreal. And that's when I told you the story, and that happened. It's a true story. When I decided not to play Yvon Lambert, and Claude Ruel was my assistant, and it was tough on him too, because he was very close to the players. But when I brought them all in, a couple of them wouldn't stop protesting, and I remember it like it was yesterday. A couple of them were really good players. I mean, Hall of Fame players. And Bob Gainey had a lot to say. Even though he wasn't a scorer, he was a big key player on the team. And I was trying to explain things to them, but they wouldn't listen. And right in front of them, he said, and we had another one in Pittsburgh the same way, Brian Trottier. But Bob Gainey said, let him speak. he's the coach. Don't tell him what to do. I mean, that's unusual, but Trottier was that kind of a player. We were fortunate, like Craig Patrick made that signing. I think Bob Johnson and the late Bob Johnson had a lot to say about it because, Brian had kind of outlived his usefulness with, he was such a competitor, and the Islanders were on the decline. They didn't get rid of any of their veterans. They wanted to get one more kick at the can. And, Pat LaFontaine was an up-and-coming star, which he became. But Brian didn't want to relinquish. I mean, that's why he was so good. He was such a competitor. Right. Nobody was going to take his job. And unfortunately for the Islanders, I mean, they were going downhill, but he got in a big dispute with both Bill Torrey and Al Arbor, and they didn't keep him. I mean, Craig signed him. I'm pretty sure he was a free agent. Wasn't he, Pierre? He signed him.
He was a free agent.
He's a free agent, but those players mean a lot to the coach, and he later on was a coach in Colorado, but that's what happens to those guys.
Pierre?
No, Scotty. Florida, Edmonton. Nobody knows more about these teams than you. Who do you like? Who do you don't like?
Well, I like both of them. I really, I'm not amazed. I mean, it's happened before, but the Oilers were a high-scoring machine, as everyone knows, and then all of a sudden, when push come to shove, even against Vancouver, but Vancouver was hurting, I think, and also they were missing their goalie. But they played tight. They tried to play tight, not tighter than the last game. But the last game to me was the proof of the team, because people say, how can they win a game with 10 shots? I said, yeah, but they didn't need any more shots. So instead of trying to get 20 shots, they played pretty good defense. They got a few breaks. I mean, obviously, I didn't think at the time that the 2-0 was going to hold up. I said, they're going to need a third goal. I just don't think this other team's going to be blanked. And of course, they scored one goal halfway through the third. But I think to me, what's going to happen, both teams are going to be well rested, which is going to be unusual going into a final. Usually, there's one team that has a bit of an edge. We don't know the injury factor. I just heard something yesterday. Somebody was mentioning Evander Kane, but he's gonna be okay. He didn't finish the last game, but every player is important on a team like even a good team like Edmonton. Although he hasn't had a great playoff, he's still he's got sandpaper, and they don't have as much maybe as the team in Florida, the Panthers, but. I think it's going to be this. If the Panthers can continue to play their busy game, forechecking, pinching down, everybody moving at the right time, the secret is going to be, can they hem in the Edmonton defense? Can the Edmonton defense get the puck out of the end zone as fast as they can? If they don't, if they have to play a lot in their own end, they seem to be like the Stars had the puck in the end a lot, and I think even Wayne Gretzky mentioned something that I was watching too. He said, like, yes, they're getting territorial advantage, but they're not getting the middle of the ice. They're getting the puck on the sides all the time, and we know they can score from the side. A lot of teams can, but it seems that. Like if Edmonton can get the puck out of their own end, it's going to be key. If they don't, then I think you're going to see look what happened to the Rangers. I mean, we know now the Rangers were hurting. I mean, the Adam Fox and Trouba and Lindgren, all of those players weren't like they were during the season. But I think the Oilers are. I mean, they got some youth. They got Bouchard. I mean, they're not that old. I mean. Cece, they got Nurse, and they're pretty good size. Ekman is a big guy, so that'll be the key. Can the Panthers forecheck like they did? If they do, they're going to be tough to beat.
Yeah.
Hey, Jimmy, before you go, I want to ask Scotty one thing about leadership, because you already talked about Bob Gainey. Scotty, I know you watch everything. Before Game 4, they put Stuart Skinner and Connor McDavid on a podium in the afternoon before Game 4. The media went after them. Connor McDavid stands and says, no, I'm going to take that question in regards to the Darnell Nurse. I said on this show, it reminded me of Bob Gainey's leadership. When you saw that, were you impressed by Connor McDavid? What did you think at that time?
Well, I mean, I was, I was pleased that a player would come, because it's pretty hard. Nurse was struggling, but at least like Connor's got a lot of stability. He's not a. I don't know him that well. I know he's not a media darling because he doesn't play up to the media, but he's very honest, and I think he's smart enough to know that we can't maybe win if Nurse doesn't play a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I look at that team and I said, people don't realize 9 years goes quickly, and whatever Draisaitl's probably 7 or 8, but Nugent Hopkins and Draisaitl, every player is important on a team, but those three, Nugent Hopkins and Connor and Leon Draisaitl, they've had a lot of disappointments. It's really tough. I mean, when you're at the top of the heap and you're individually, Nugent Hopkins was a number 1 pick. Mm-hmm. What was Draisaitl, Pierre? Was he number 3 or
3?
Yep,
3. And Connor was 1 in a landslide. So I mean, when you get a lot of pressure when you're one of those players, and they've had so many disappointments. Even this year, they had a big disappointment with the way they started the season. We were wondering how they're gonna turn it around, which they did. But I that's what I thought. Connor was really thinking about how can we. I want to win. He wants to win. I mean, everybody wants to win, but I think more so when you've been in the league 9 years and you've been. I had a similar situation, even a little bit longer, and Pierre knows a little bit about it because I've said it to him. But when I got to Detroit in 1993, Steve Yzerman was in his 11th season, and I think he was captain for 10 of them because they made him captain when he was very young. He had that good first year. He was drafted, I think, number 3 too. But he came in there and he was a scoring machine. I mean, but he was every year they would lose in the playoffs, and he was so down. I mean, now he's probably looking. I'm nearly 30 years old, and I can't get. And it was even worse because he could hardly get by the first round. Mm-hmm. They never went past. I mean, the first few years they didn't even make the playoffs, and then they got a little bit better, but not good enough to win a series. And he was so desperate. It was kind of easy in a way because I said, Steve, this team has got to play a lot different. You can't keep trying to outscore. They had just lost to Toronto, and it was a tough loss because in 91, 92, I went there in 93, so it would be the season 92. It would be 91, 92. They played the Leafs, mm-hmm. and they were a high scoring team. They got behind at Toronto. Toronto was Pat Burns was he was a demanding coach, and his teams they were pretty tight. They could stop you, and they stopped them for the most part. And they were ahead 3-2, and they went into Toronto, and the Red Wings. That's when they just could do this. They scored 4 goals on a power play, and they beat them 7-4. But they scored 7 goals to win. They scored 5 to win the game, and yet they lost that series. So I said, Steve, this is not going to work. But the unfortunate thing is, you're not going to get 60 goals. You're not going to get 160 points. But I think if you could just work a little bit on the face-offs, blocking shots. I mentioned a couple of players. I mentioned. Brian Trotzy, I mentioned what he was. I said we only had him briefly, but the other guy I mentioned that was a great offensive player, because I coached him when he was 16, was Jacques Lemaire. And then, Jacques Lemaire and Yvan Cornway kind of grew up together. They're from a suburb in Montreal, Lachine. And they both played, Lachine was always a good junior B team, Maroons. And, when Yvan Cornway first came out of junior, my God, he was as fast a player as, he was like a McDavid in a comparison as speed. That's how he got the nickname, the Roadrunner. So he came out of junior with a lot of stats and goals and offense. The first year, and they had a decent team. They weren't a powerhouse, but the first year, the late Toe Blake, he played him only on the power play. He just didn't like his game, checking. There's more of the kids that come out of junior now that have to learn how to play defense because you get drafted with offense. But Yvan was a scoring machine, and Jacques Lemaire followed him about a year or two later, set records in Junior B. I coached him in Montreal Juniors, and we got beat in the playoffs by Oshawa. But before that, we played Peterborough, and that was a Montreal farm team. But they didn't get the top players from Montreal. They would send, but they had a young, not a young player, but Pierre wouldn't remember him. He made the NHL, but he wasn't an NHL prospect for Canadians. His name was Andre Lacroix, and he later went to Hartford, I think. And he was, oh boy, he was a minor league player, but he was close to NHL. And Andre Lacroix was older than Jacques, and Jacques was about 16 or 17, and we played in a series against Peterborough in the playoffs. I couldn't play Jacques I couldn't play him against Lacroix. And it's hard to believe. I said, Jacques, you got to start playing defense, and I even told him once, I said, you think you're going to play in Montreal in a year or two? You're not. You won't play in Montreal. Toe Blake will not take you if you don't start playing defense. And of course, he just turned his game around. And by the time he got up to Montreal, he was a good two-way player. And then he scored a lot. And then he could. Then when he was scoring more than he was checking, but then all of a sudden we needed to put him with both Lafleur and Schutt to give them some balance on the checking. And Jacques loved that role. He became. We had good centermen too. We had checking centermen that could stop the opposition. But Jacques Lemaire was a perfect player to say, this is a two-way player. I like those kind of players. Jean Rattel in Boston was a similar kind of player. They weren't flashy defensively, but they were responsible.
Hey, Jimmy, from 1971 final, Jacques Lemaire from center ice, Antonio Esposito switched the whole game around. Henri Richard scores 2 goals. Canadians beat the Blackhawks. And when Scotty was talking about Detroit and Toronto, Nikolai Borshevsky, Game 7, Pat Burns is the coach. Boom, to the back of the net. Series over.
Yep.
That was a sad loss for Detroit because they had a high-powered. That's the other thing about, we can get back to this series because, and I heard somebody interviewed the other day, and I agreed 100% with them. When people say, well, Edmonton, their power play's running at 37%, and I think Panthers are around 24. So it's not like they don't have a power play, right. And I think they got a similar type of power play. They execute very well. They got good plays. They got that bump up play, that big goal in overtime when the Panthers were down 2-1. The goal by Reinhardt, and that's a hard one to take away because I watch the Lightning play all the time, and as great as Kucherov, he's a machine. Stamkos can fire with anybody, but the one that if everything doesn't work, they give the bumper play to point. And he puts it. That's how he got it. He's got about 45 goals this year. But I think when you get into the finals, people say, "Well, the referees don't want to decide the game." That's a possibility. They're human too. But the players are careful in the playoff, in the finals. I'd be surprised if either team, they're going to be so respectful of the team's power play. And that's another thing with Edmonton. Like, they won that last game against Dallas. What, a goal in 18 seconds, a goal in 16 seconds.
Yeah.
2 power play goals.
There you go.
They're going to have to score even strength because I think if I could be wrong, but if we get more than 2 or 3 power plays a game, either team, it's going to be unusual. Because I don't think Florida Panthers, they're a well run machine. They're in there last year. They got experience. They once, the thing you got to be careful, and Pierre knows this because we were there in the second year with Pittsburgh. But when you've been there once, and whether you win or lose, you like the Panthers lost last year. They were banged up and they lost pretty quickly to Vegas. But they all the distractions, all the pressure in that, once you get through it the first time, and they didn't win last year. It'd be different if they would have won. But so they're going to be saying, how many chances are we going to have? This is a tough division. I mean, you got Boston, you got Tampa still going to be a contender. You got Toronto, and then you got these other teams just ready to make a move. So this will be a tight series, and I don't know if the power plays are going to be plentiful. I don't think they will.
I agree.
Scotty, you brought up, the fact they were there last year too, and I wanted to ask you this question: how much? And you can, I'm thinking of you guys when you were with Detroit. You lose to Colorado in 1996. And you come back, you beat them the following year. How much do you, like, as a coach, when you come back that next year in training camp, and you've been that far to the conference final or to the Stanley Cup final, but you lost, and you want them to draw on that, but you also want them to move forward? How do you balance that with the team, and how do you sort of use that as motivation?
Well, that series in particular, we lost the year before, and we brought it on ourselves because we slammed the Canadians 11-3 in Montreal, and that was the Patrick Roy. We pushed.
That's right.
And Patrick was a money goalie, and it was so hard. The first year we had a good team. I mean, we were just close enough. But, the kid was young. Chris Osgood was 23, maybe 22. And, Patrick's sitting at the other end. When you're the goalie and you're sitting at a future Hall of Famer, but see, the next year we kind of got fortunate because Mike Vernon came in, and he and Chris Chris kind of took over the job the last half of the season. And Mike was still a good goalie. Yeah. But when the playoffs started, we went to Mike, and because not that we're going to play Colorado in the first round, but I said, nobody's going to beat Patrick if he's not experienced. I mean, you're not going to go against Patrick if you don't have a goalie that's can push him like a Brodeur or those top guys. Same thing happened in 2002. I mean, they were still a great team in 2002 when we played them and had the 7th game at home. But Patrick, once again, we were fortunate in Detroit. I mean, Kenny Holland was pretty superb in picking up these guys. I mean, it's amazing. He even picked up guys for Edmonton this year, but he picked up Dominic Hasek. Yep. And Dominic shut him out twice in the last game. I mean, he shut out Colorado games 6 and 7. 2-0 and 7-0. But I mean, okay, the 7-0 game you didn't need a shutout, but Patrick was a goalie that could really work. I mean, he was confident. He wasn't afraid to say what he remember that thing he did with Jeremy Roenick.
The rings in the ears.
but Patrick had a lot of confidence, and rightly so. I mean, I think when he was he a rookie when he got the 10 overtime wins? Or
no, the 10 overtime was 1993. 86, he was a rookie. 86.
Yeah. But I mean, imagine winning 10 games in overtime. So I mean, that's what I look at this series. Edmonton has some experience, but I think they got to make sure that they play that tight game. I was amazed how they could beat Edmonton. They beat Dallas in Dallas game 5, and then come back. And gee, it's amazing. I mean, they got him. They must have. When you get the best player. I mean, Connor's the best player in the league right now. I mean, the most individual. I mean, there's other players that are really good too, but I mean, is he going to be able to, like? I mean, they're going to. I think Edmonton's got to really. He'll raise his game. I mean, those top guys like he and Draisaitl, they're not easy to stop. I mean, they're tough to stop, but But that other team is a complete machine. Yeah. I mean, Paul Maurice doesn't. He uses 6 defensemen, and I scratched my head at the beginning of the playoffs. I said his third pair. I mean, they're rejects from other teams. They're playing steady. Kulikov's been around the block, and now he looks like he's part of as good as they got, and he plays them a lot, and he moves guys in, and I mean, I guess Edmonton might do the same thing. They move guys in and out a little bit, and they don't score goals, but they play good defense. Those guys like Brown and McLeod and those guys, they don't score much, but they can. And now they got Perry going again. He's an experienced guy. I mean,
a lot of experience. Hey, Jimmy, by the way, Scotty's talking about Patty Roy. It was 86. He made 20 saves in overtime against the New York Rangers.
Wow.
20 saves in overtime. They beat the Rangers, eventually going to win the Stanley Cup in 86.
Yeah.
But, Scotty's so right about all those players. This is the one question that I think everybody wants to know. Scotty, if you're Edmonton and you're Chris Knobloch, are you playing Draisaitl and McDavid together on the road, or are you splitting them up to create a matchup problem?
I think he'll play them apart to start because he can form a couple of lines, and it looks like what he does now, Pierre, after penalty killing, at maybe 2 or 3 times in a period, he'll throw them if it's 4-on-4, or if he sees he can get a matchup that the other team maybe doesn't have who he wants trying to stop them, and he puts them together. But I really think, because of the way that Paul Maurice plays his lines, unless he went to the Barkov line an awful lot, and I don't think he will. I think he plays them more than the others, but they still play the other. I mean, Rodriguez now, it looks like he's moved in now with Tkachuk. Like, even after
Rodriguez, you're right on.
He doesn't score yet, but so I think my answer is I think he'll throw them in at different times in the game. If they're behind, maybe a little more, but he needs to have 2 lines that can score. I don't think he can afford to put them, because he kind of likes Nugent Hopkins now. Like, he's had a rebirth in the playoffs, and with Connor and Hyman, he's got a pretty decent line there, And then Draisaitl, I mean, he hasn't been as key as I thought he might be, but I wouldn't say he couldn't do it because of the way that the Panthers play. But Evander Kane is probably is a very important player for Edmonton. People to say, what do you mean he hasn't played much? But he did play for Edmonton against Tkachuk for Calgary. That's another matchup that they were into each other most. But I mean, of course, Tkachuk is older now, and he's on a better team, and he's got confidence now too. He's been able to get through and bother players, and so that's something that you got to be careful of too.
Yep, for sure. Scotty, listen, always a pleasure, my friend. I don't know if you want to make a prediction. You're more than welcome, but if not, don't worry about it, because we don't usually do it either. So
yeah, I mean, I hear all. I think if I had to lean, I'd be. I mean, I just want to have a good series. I got no axe to grind with either team. I like the way I know Paul Maurice pretty well, and I also know Kenny Holland on the other side. So I got no
Either way, it's good.
Just
Coach Paul Coffey. Come on, like
Paul Coffey's made it. Well,
what a difference he's made, huh?
Well, I mean, he's given. It came in and told the defenseman, don't just throw the puck away, because he never threw the puck away. He wasn't big defensively. That's probably what happened to him. He moved from team to team, but he was an offensive threat. He's done a great. I don't know how he's done it, because I mean, Bouchard has changed his game from during the season, and he's an Edmonton guy. He had his success was in Edmonton and Pittsburgh mainly, but he's an Edmonton guy. When you win so many times, I mean, what did they win? Like 5 cups with him, or 4?
I think
4 maybe?
4 with Coffey.
You see 4. Gretzky had 4. Yeah. Messier, those guys. I mean, the team started in '79, and by 90 they had 5 cups. Nobody said,
it's like Montreal. Come on, let's go.
Yeah. Okay.
He's not old enough to remember this. 68, 69, 70. St. Louis Blues go to the Stanley Cup Final 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
Well, the team that's never got any credit from the start of Edmonton's got credit, but the Montreal Canadiens, like losing that game in '67 to Toronto, they were favored. I mean, Toronto had an experienced team, but don't forget the Montreal Canadiens won 64-65. 65, 66, 67, 68, 69. That loss in '67, that's still 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
But nobody ever says that team was any good. Imagine if they would have won in '67. They tie up a record that's never been broken and probably never will, 5 in a row.
Yeah.
So, and I don't remember all the players on those teams, and because I had already gone. I was there for the 65, 66. I do remember, and I left in 60. I left after the 66 win. But boy, that was an amazing run for Montreal and unheralded.
Yeah.
Jimmy, Scotty's got a lot of records, but this is one I bet he doesn't even know he has. The 1992 Penguins won 11 straight games to win the Stanley Cup. No team has ever done that before, and no team has done it since.
It's that right behind me there, Scotty. Right, there you go.
Well, wait a minute, Pierre. I think also that year it was an amazing thing, but Chicago went into that series we both went in the same. We both went in with 7 in a row.
We did. Okay.
Chicago was we were so, you think about breaks. I mean, like I see the goals that mean good and bad in my career. But, I see the game that we lost next year. But when Volek scored, I see that goal a lot. But what about the goal that Jaromir Jagr scored?
Off the boards?
Yeah,
I
remember that.
If Chicago wins the first game in that series, you got a whole new ball game.
Yep.
Jimmy, he's talking about that goal because Jaromir goes against 2 elite defensive players. And Scotty knows Mario from the icing line off Eddie Belfour's butt into the net. That got everybody in Pittsburgh jacked up. The dynamic of that game. And then Jaromir does the tap dance and
you're right. I mean, we're down in that game 4-1 and come back and win it in regulation. So, well, guys, I hope you keep going. And
pretty good coach, Jimmy. He's a pretty coach. Pretty good coach.
Not too shabby.
Okay, Jimmy.
Scotty. Thank you so much.
Bye.
It was a pleasure. Enjoy the final. Scotty Bowman joining us.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Seriously, come on.
I know. And you know what, Pierre? It's almost like we were telepath. I literally was going to ask him to compare McDavid buying into the 200-foot game and Yzerman, but he went right to it. He's amazing.
Well, you just with him, because I've been in a lot of meetings.
He's that parallel too. Yeah.
But you've been in a lot of meetings with him. You ask him a question. The brain is so engaged. And he's got the ability, and this is where I don't get what a lot of these guys in the league are doing now. you got a lot of older assets around, people that have a lot of experience. I was told by somebody, well, Pierre, it's not the 1990s anymore. We don't have to do things that way. He's just sitting there referencing the mid-1960s with Cornway and Lemaire.
Yep.
And he's talking about Toll Blake, and he's talking
it
about
applies to today.
Like all this stuff, man, all those games and all those cups he won, he was utilizing that information. I'm just telling you because I was there, I lived it, with all those experiences he had with the late Frank Selke Sr., with Dick Irvin Sr., with Toll Blake. I mean, I know all the stories. I was his roommate.
I know.
I mean, I laugh. I can't believe he should be on everybody's speed dial.
Yeah.
Everybody. There's nobody better. I'm just telling you.
Look, you know, you could say this for any sport. I mean, when it comes down to it, a lot of things change, rules change, players change, whatever. But when it comes down to it, the core of the game is still somewhat always the same. And you can apply so many lessons learned from the past whenever, 10 years from now, somebody should be picking a coach to pick Paul Maurice's brain 20 years from now, because he can give you stuff that still will be valuable. And that's I'm with you. I don't understand why people don't take advantage of the knowledge that is there with a guy like Scotty Bowman or somebody else like him, because it's still so applicable. It really is.
The mentorship matters so much.
Oh, yeah. Jimmy Montgomery calls him all the time.
We've been talking about this from day one on this show, the eye test. And I learned that from one guy in college, Joe Marsh, who was spectacular. And then the other one is obviously Scotty, Bob Johnson, and Craig Patrick. Mm-hmm. I had the unbelievable life experience to work for those men.
It's amazing.
And if you don't learn from them, then you got a problem.
No, shame on you.
You don't listen and you don't pay attention.
Yep.
Unbelievable. But that's amazing to do that. That man's unbelievable.
I know. I love, like I said, when he drew that parallel right away, I didn't even have to bring it up. He went right to it, talking about Eisman to McDavid. And I bet, Pierre, if we had the time, we could sit here and he could pick like a player from each generation, a star that's bought in like that, and it ended up benefiting him and his team.
He was in the room. He didn't share it all with you because I know the whole story about how they got Yzerman straightened up in Detroit.
Yep.
Nobody's heard it like that. I'm just telling you. And I'm telling you, there's more to the story.
Oh, you've told me. I know. I don't know what I can say, so I keep quiet.
No, you don't say a word. But it just shows you. And so what did he do? He picked out one player that Yzerman would recognize who had coached against him.
Yep.
Jacques Lemaire.
Unreal. It's beautiful.
This is the intelligence of the man.
Yeah.
He didn't have to rehearse that. He just did it. And I'll never forget it. He didn't want to say too much, and I get it, so I'll say it for him. When we took the plane down to Washington and we took our bus to the Green Tree Marriott, it was called at the time.
Is it the one in Annapolis?
In Landover. Okay. We stayed in Annapolis between games 3 and 4, between 1 and 2, and then we went Green Tree because we didn't have as much time between games. Anyways, he said to me, make sure Mario comes to my room and we're going to show him how we're going to play game 5. Mm-hmm. And he's going to tell the team. He's going to sell it to the team. So he kind of told you a little part of it where he says before the game, the day before the game, Mario was in his suite and Scotty gave Mario the talk. He said, okay, Pierre and Barry and Rick, show him what we want to do. We got the board out. We did it. Wow. And then Mario, none of the coaches were there. Mario gave the presentation to the team. That was Scotty's idea.
Wow. That's awesome. Good stuff. And look what it led to for the Pittsburgh Penguins there. All right, listen, let's go to our sponsor right now because I know we got a ton of questions lined up here, and we want to get right to them. TCS Customs and Logistics. Unlock the full potential of your shipping operation with TCS Customs and Logistics. From around the corner to around the world, flatbeds to air freight, customs clearance to drawback consulting. TCS is a one-stop shop for all things transport, moving pieces and delivering a peace of mind. For no obligation customs or freight quote, contact sickpodcast at shiptcs.com. Again, that is sickpodcast at shiptcs.com. Let's get to those questions. Let's fire through them. Here we go. Bill Van Vagel, Pierre and Jimmy, where does the 76-77 Habs team stand among all-time All-time great teams, only 8 losses, and deep in all positions. Pierre, you know way more about this than me. I'll let you take that.
Bill, I'll tell you, Scotty coached that team, and he coached the Detroit team that was really good. And I think he'll be probably a little more partial to the Detroit team. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that 8-loss team in Montreal was phenomenal. It was just a different NHL. It wasn't as big.
Mm-hmm.
The West Coast travel wasn't as, frantic as it is now or was with Detroit. But I'd say probably a slight edge to Detroit, but that Montreal team is one of the top 4 teams of all time, probably one of the top 2 teams of all time.
All right, next question. Max R. Florida only has 3 drafted players in their lineup. Do you think teams are going to try and copy them and be more aggressive with their trades and signings?
Max, it's a great point. So I just not because I'm trying to be 3 players drafted by their organization. There are a bunch of guys. All the other guys were drafted.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other ones. Spencer Knight, who's around the team. Mackie Samoskevich. And they're more going forward. There's going to be more, let's say, drafted players on their roster. But pro scout, I've been saying on this show forever. That's why it's called the eye test.
Mm-hmm.
Pro scouting is about seeing when players are rising and when players are descending.
Mm-hmm.
Who fits, who doesn't fit. That's why the eye test matters when it comes to evaluating pro players.
Agreed. I want to just say quickly, we can pull it up. Sammy has a chart of how that roster was built for the Florida Panthers. So let's look at it. So there you go. Ekblad, Barkov, Lundell, and Kulikov. That's right. This is what, his second time around with the Panthers, Kulikov?
Yeah, so Kulikov was drafted way
long time ago. I remember Mark Recchi talking to me about him way back. The Bruins were trying to get him in 2010. I remember they were trying to trade for him. And then you look at those trades, Pierre. I mean, just some really great trades, some heists. Now, when you look at it, hindsight's 2020.
Bennett one is a heist.
Yeah,
Kachuk is a heist.
Yeah.
Reinhardt, I wouldn't say is a heist because Devin Levi is going to be a
great
player. It's a first-round pick. I wouldn't call that a heist.
Who did that first-round pick become, Pierre? Do you know?
I don't remember.
Okay.
We got to go look.
And then look at the free agents, too. Bobrovsky. And you know what? Ekman Larson kind of getting under sort of quietly.
Scotty was talking about their third pairing. It's Kulikov and Ekman Larson.
There you go.
And he's like, I don't know about those. And you know what? At the beginning of the playoffs, how good to know they were no good. They weren't very good.
Good on Ekman Larson. I love when players that get bought out, Pierre, find a new home, get their stuff together, get it going again. It's good to see. All right, let's go. Next question. State of survival. If Bossy was healthy, how likely would it be that he scores 1,000 goals?
I wouldn't say 1,000, but he would have scored. He would have scored a ton.
Yeah.
Obviously, the big thing with Mike was the power play in New York. The Islanders was really good, and Brian Trottier and Clark Gillies were amazing line mates. And he was deferred to all the time, by Al Arbor, the coach. So Mike was in a really good situation. I would have liked to have seen, and I mean no disrespect to Denny Savard. Not to Denny Savard, to the late Doug Wickenheiser. I would have liked to have seen what would have happened if Montreal at one point maybe would have gone after Bossy. I don't know.
Wow, that would have been something. All right, next question.
And Denny Savard, they eventually got Savard.
Yeah, but by that time.
Yeah.
Randy Workman. Hey, Randy. Jimmy and Pierre, who do you think wins the boards war in this series? Florida. That's just one. If you could bet on that, I would bet the house on it. All right, next question. Jeffrey B. Hey, gentlemen, New Jersey's looking for a goalie, and Fitzgerald seems willing to move that 10th overall pick. But do you think they also need more grit and nastiness to take them to the next level? Jeff, before Pierre answers, I don't know if Pierre saw it, but I will say that in that same story where that came out, he did say he wants some more nastiness on the back end to Pierre LeBrun. So you're on to something for sure.
Yeah, and he signed McDermott, who's tough, and that's probably to stabilize if New York Rangers decide to play Rempe a lot, because those games matter a lot. And Philadelphia is obviously going to be probably improved. And so, they need a goalie, an elite goalie. They probably need a little bit more swagger, physical swagger. So that's not a bad point. But they did, just so everybody remembers, they signed McDermott to an extension.
Yeah, and I love that pickup when they acquired him. All right, next question. Mike, no one really speaks about him, but how much of an impact has Luongo had on this Florida team? Pierre, you would know better than me.
I don't really know. I know that.
Oh, okay.
I don't, because I haven't really been down there. I haven't really evaluated their workload. I mean, they've done. Bobrovsky's been really good. They had Alex Lyon last year, and Alex Lyon's not there anymore. He's in Detroit. But they put together a goaltending program that seems to be working for them, which is obviously really good.
One thing I noticed too over the last year or two, he travels more with the team. Like I see him more around the rinks. So,
I think that's good. I just don't know. I know one thing. Anytime I was around Roberto when he was a player, it was always a good time. Like he was a really proud professional. You know what I mean? He didn't take it for granted. He was a proud professional. He really was.
Yep, for sure. All right, next question. Randy Workman. Pierre, how good would Ken Dryden be today?
With the equipment that these guys have, really good. Go take a look at the pictures of how small his equipment was. Put some of the equipment that some of these guys wear now.
It's crazy.
He was novel because he was so large and he was so quick, and he could take away the lower part of the net. I mean, I was a kid. 71 was his coming out party. They beat Boston the first round. They never should have beat him. And then they beat Chicago. He went head-to-head with Tony Esposito. He played Minnesota that year too. They went head-to-head with Cesar Maniego. I mean, I remember a lot about Kenny, and he was way ahead of his time because of how quick he was and how big he was.
Wow.
But put the equipment on like these guys were today. I'd like to see what he could do. He could probably do unbelievable.
Yeah, for sure. It looks like that's it for questions, but I want to tell Alex, I saw a comment. I tried to reply. I don't know why it's not letting me. My replies weren't sending. Alex, if you still want to send a video question, there you go. Hit me up on Twitter at Murphy's Law 74. Follow me, then I'll follow you back, and then you can DM me and you can DM the question there. That's how our good friend Shane does it. So that's how you do that. And we'll look forward to it as well. Hey, so tomorrow we want to remind everyone we are on at noon Eastern, not our usual 4 p.m. I have to be later in the day. My daughter Maddie has her big dance recital. Really psyched for her. So we will be going at 12. Pierre and I will get more in depth into kind of the series and our outlooks. And also, I forget who it was yesterday. I apologize, that asked us to redo the top 10 in the 2015 draft. Well, I did a little of that today. So we will do that again. So ask that question. Whoever it was, ask it again tomorrow, please. And we will talk about that tomorrow. It is quite interesting. I'm glad you asked us to do that. It was a fun exercise to see where these guys are lining up now. There were some steals later in that draft for sure. So there we go. State of Survival. That was me. All right, State of Survival. We will have that for you tomorrow. Don't you worry. And Pierre, thanks for setting that up as always. Scotty Bowman, what a pleasure it is to have him on. Just an honor to talk to him. And as always, he was so sharp and still has it. And so thanks to Scotty Bowman for joining us here on the Eye Test. Thanks to you, the viewers and listeners. Thanks to our production crew up in Montreal. This has been another edition of the Eye Test here on the Sick Podcast Network.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Eye Test with Pierre McGuire and Jimmy Murphy on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. Brought to you by TCS Customs and Logistics. Moving pieces, delivering peace of mind.